It's amazing to think that never in the history of this country has it been a better time to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. It's astonishing to look back at how far we've come on rights for lesbian, gay, and bisexual people in just the past few decades. Back in 2000, California voters voted to ban recognition of gay marriage by an almost 2/3 majority. Only 8 years later, when we voted on Proposition 8, the results were heartbreakingly close. And just 6 years after that, in the months before the Supreme Court made marriage equality the law of the land last June, surveys showed that almost 2/3 of Americans supported marriage equality. Even more than that, I have been astounded by the gains of recognition and equality for transgender and genderqueer folks in the past 5 to 10 years, which has come much faster than I'm sure many of us can believe. Many states have been passing laws preventing discrimination against LGBTQ folks in employment and housing. Clearly, the tide is turning or has turned. And with such significant shifts happening, the question arises, do we even need to celebrate National Coming Out Day anymore? After all, it's a lot easier to come out now in 2016 than it was in 2006, or in 1990, or even more so than it was when I was in high school back in 1996, when Rent was the hottest show on Broadway, and being lesbian, gay, or bisexual had already lost much of the stigma that existed in 1986 during the height of the AIDS crisis, 2 years before the first National Coming Out Day and the 1987 March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights it commemorates. So why do we need to still celebrate National Coming Out Day in 2016? More than anything else, the profound national shift in acceptance and equality for LGBTQ folks that has happened because more people know someone who is close to them who is LGBTQ, and when the issue becomes personal, then people's thoughts and opinions start to change. In other words, the dramatic shifts that have come about in this country have come about because people came out to their friends and their families, in large part. Like John, whose opinions changed after his son Ricky came out. Of course, they did not change quickly or easily. But he was changed such that he was able to visit his son's partner in the hospital as he was dying. Or like the Jennings family, who once they realized that their child identified as a girl, not only allowed Jazz to transition, but did an amazing job at protecting and supporting her as she faced the still real challenges of being transgender in America. Today, a large number of people who are coming out are immediately met with love, acceptance, and support from their friends and families and community. And that is truly something to celebrate. You know, it was at a service like this, at the church I grew up in, when the worship leader asked if anyone wanted to come out, and I stood up and came out to the congregation as bisexual. Although most of my friends already knew, it was my first time coming out to a group of people. It was also the first time I had told my parents, although they already knew, as they had dropped hints both subtle and embarrassingly unsubtle. I was a little bit nervous beforehand, but I really felt comfortable doing it because I knew that the congregation and my parents would still greet me with love and support. Yet even though I had no doubt about it, it was still a relief to share that important part of my identity with the congregation and to receive their continued love and affirmation. And I finally felt like I was bringing my whole self to church. And that's another reason we need to keep celebrating National Coming Out Day. Because we need it for ourselves. And we need to keep recognizing it because coming out is not a one-time thing. Those of us who are queer have to come out over and over again to our friends, to our family, to our coworkers, to people we meet at a party. And it can be a lot of work. So how great it was that Gail and Marjorie could come out to this congregation when they joined as members without it having to be a big deal. Of course, the fact that it wasn't a big deal was, in fact, a big deal. In a society where coming out still carries risks of being bullied and harassed, of losing friends and family, and in the worst cases, losing your life, to be able to come out in a church community can be such a healing experience. To let go of all those little lies and those worries of will I be found out. For people like me who identify as bisexual but are in monogamous heterosexual relationships and thus are able to pass as straight, the question of coming out becomes more complicated. The first house I moved into after finishing college was with people I had found through Craigslist. And at the time, I was dating a woman, so my housemates probably just assumed I was straight like them. And I didn't bother coming out to them. I wasn't trying to hide it from them, but I wasn't jumping to tell them either. Because no one asked me, I was content with passing as straight and letting them assume whatever they assumed. But within a few weeks, I started hearing the occasional offhand remark from my housemates and their friends as they ribbed each other playfully. That's so gay. Stop being a fag. I don't think they were trying to be hateful, and they might not have said that if they knew that I was in fact bisexual, but hearing those casually homophobic comments was enough for me to question whether this was a safe space to be myself. So I never came out to them, and I kept that part of me hidden. At times it was painful, and I never truly felt like that house was my home, because I didn't feel like I could bring my whole self. I stayed there for a few more months before I found a new place to live. And from then on, I was a lot more careful about who I chose as roommates, and made sure to come out to them early on. Coming out as who we are is incredibly important for living a life that is whole and not fragmented. Coming out can help us heal from the pain of hiding that piece of ourselves, whatever it is. It may not be being LGBTQ, it may be some secret, some part of our identity that we feel we have to hide. It's painful to hide that, to hide a piece of who we are. Maybe it's addiction, or addiction in the family, struggles that we have, depression. It's hard. So it's vital that we be able to come out, and yet coming out is not always easy and can still be dangerous today. Because despite the tremendous advances we have made as a society, LGBTQ youth are still kicked out of their homes by families and often rejected by their communities. Queer and trans youth make up a staggering proportion of homeless youth. There are still only 20 states that protect against employment discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, and 16 states offer no protection whatsoever. Many states are now passing bathroom bills to discriminate against transgender folks. And this summer we saw the horrific attack on the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, which shattered many LGBTQ folks' sense of safety in one of the places that had historically been one of the only public places LGBTQ folks felt they could congregate and feel safe. And meanwhile, the murder of Brandy Bledsoe 2 weeks ago was the 23rd reported homicide of a transgender person this year, almost all of whom were trans women of color. That means 2 more people have already been killed compared to last year's record-setting 21 murders, and it's still only October. Clearly, there is still a lot of work to do and justice to be fought for, which is why National Coming Out Day is also about straight people coming out as allies. People who they know they can come out to safely, who speak up against bigotry and intolerance, even if no LGBT folks are in the room, and who will join in the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. And that is one of the reasons I am so proud to be a Unitarian Universalist, because we have a long and proud history of welcoming and affirming LGBT folks in our congregations and working for justice and equality in the larger society. In 1970, we became the first faith to speak out against discrimination against gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. We were celebrating same-sex unions when, as Gail said, marriage equality was but a distant dream. And then when gay marriage became legal for that brief window in 2008, our ministers married members in Sunday morning worship services and officiated weddings at county clerk's offices. Our choir in Long Beach even showed up outside the clerk's offices on that first day and sang for those who could finally get legally married. And we were probably the most active denomination in the campaign against Proposition 8. And when the Supreme Court overturned it, we were right back there at the county clerk's office celebrating. Here at Emerson, back in April 1997, we became recognized as a welcoming congregation, which was actually after Emerson had called its first openly lesbian minister, Reverend Gail Geisenhainer. We don't usually think about Unitarian Universalism as a saving faith. Yet, after all, we don't promise that if you come and worship here and believe like us, that you will be granted eternal salvation. Yet Unitarian Universalism is a life-saving faith. It is a life-saving faith when we welcome and affirm that teenager who has been rejected by the family because of who they love. When those raised in a church community that told them there was something wrong with them, that they were sinful and broken, and that God couldn't love them, when that person, hurting and in doubt, comes to a church that tells them they are whole, and they are beautiful just as they are, and that they are worthy of love of any God that deserves our worship, then Unitarian Universalism is a life-saving faith.
Amen, brother.
When that middle school student who is grappling with their sexuality and being bullied at school contemplates the tragic thought of ending their life only to find friendship and support from a youth who went through our sexual education program, then we are a saving faith. When that young person who is sitting in church here on Sunday mornings trying to figure out their sexual orientation or gender identity knows that whenever they decide to come out, they will find affirmation and support and love, then this is a life-saving faith.
Yes.
I am so thankful to have grown up in a Unitarian Universalist congregation that flew a rainbow flag, that marched in the Long Beach Pride Parade, and offered comprehensive sexual education. Because while I was working through my identity, I knew that I had a community that would accept me regardless and work for a better future for me and with me. But we can't be content to rest in the work that we have done in the past, because the struggles for justice continue. It might be time to revisit the Welcoming Congregation program in the next few years, as we have many people who are not here the last time around, and our understandings, particularly around transgender and gender identity, have changed dramatically in that time. We need to keep working to be that circle of love and acceptance, so that those who are coming out have a place to come into. So I want to offer that space right now, if you are feeling so moved like I had in my home congregation. If you want to come out to this church congregation for the first time as LGBTQ, as an ally, if you feel like you want to come out again, you've already come out to this congregation, I invite you now to do so.
I am an ally. I'm an ally.
It's still hard. It's still hard. There may be people in our community who may still be grappling and may not feel like this is yet the time to come out. And know that this religious community will be here to support you just as you are. May it be so. Let's please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, Go Lift It Up.